Hello and welcome back to the Direct Capital channel, and welcome to today's episode where we're going to be focusing on the Fear and Greed Index and Bitcoin's price. Where will Bitcoin dip to, and how this indicator, how this index can help us understand where that dip might actually end. So it's going to be an interesting episode. It's going to be a quick one because later today, of course, we have the live stream for altcoin TA requests. So I'm going to be hopping on a live stream to take all your requests in the live chat at 7 p.m. UTC today. So I'm really excited about that. Of course, here you can see that the live stream is already available for you guys to join. Of course, it is a bit ahead of time, but we're going to go live 7 p.m. UTC, and the link is in the description to that live stream down below. So check it out closer to the time. I'd love to see you there and take a few of your TA requests in the live chat. So the live stream is later today at 7 p.m. UTC, but today we're going to be focusing on the Fear and Greed Index and where could Bitcoin dip. Can this index help us with that? And of course it can. I've actually written an article in the past about how we can predict reversals to the upside in Bitcoin's price using this very index, the Fear and Greed Index. So you can check it out. It's also in the description down below. But today I'm going to be focusing on these pullbacks in Bitcoin's price, because this index is also good in foreseeing, or at least giving us an indication as to whether we're going to see a pullback and how this current Bitcoin dip could potentially materialize. So yesterday the Fear and Greed Index showed us that there's a lot of greed in the market, and we needed that psychological shift. We needed the market to reset a bit, and already within 24 hours we're seeing that from 57 to 52 that greed is slowly tapering off, and you can see this in the price action as well. So yesterday's candle was a long red one to the downside, but today we're already seeing a smaller candle. So we're seeing that greed has been very much corrected for, and that today we're seeing a little bit more neutrality, a little bit more uncertainty in the price action, in the market sentiment. But I don't think this is necessarily the end of this dip, because this dip has only just started. This retrace from pretty much a few days of constant green price action to the upside, well, we need a bit more time. One day isn't enough, most likely isn't enough. So we need to give Bitcoin a bit more time. And how much time would that be? Well, this might seem like a lot, but if we break it down, it's very, very simple. So if we look at my article, for instance, where we can time Bitcoin reversals in Bitcoin's price using this Fear and Greed Index, you'll notice that this green area could be thought of as a reversal area for Bitcoin's price and the index. So every time we see the index go to extreme fear levels, we see a reversal in Bitcoin's price. And sometimes that's a small rally, a small bounce, and sometimes that's an entire swing. And like I say in my article, and I say it on my Twitter a lot as well, extreme fear. So basically these levels on the Fear and Greed Index, because the index measures fear and greed. So whenever we see the index in extremely fearful market conditions, or at least the market sentiment is on the very fearful side, that tends to precede financial opportunity in Bitcoin's price action, because we see reversals to the upside in Bitcoin's price from around this level. But can we say the same vice versa over here? Can extreme greed precede a pullback? But let's break this down a bit more before we dive in, because this right over here is pretty much the consolidation period for the Fear and Greed Index. Of course, it wicks sometimes to the green area before really rallying upwards, and Bitcoin's price action has followed suit every time. But we need to bear in mind that this has been a very long consolidation period since September 2019 all the way to around January, or even really mid-January. And we've seen this consolidation, and Bitcoin has done whatever it's done during this period. But the most important things for me are these extreme conditions, because they precede reversals, whether that's a financial opportunity or a dip or pullback. So essentially speaking, whenever Bitcoin breaks down from this range or breaks out of this range, that's when I'm interested. And if it breaks down right over here, I'm interested in potentially buying. And whenever it breaks out over here, I'm interested in potentially selling. So if we think about this range right over here, it's a very important reference point for the Fear and Greed Index. Because whenever we see these things poking out from the range, that's when we need to think about those extreme emotions in the market and to potentially think about, are people too fearful? Perhaps I should be greedy, and vice versa. Are people too greedy? Should I actually start becoming more fearful? And this is what Warren Buffett has pretty much said: buy when people are fearful and sell when people are greedy. And those are words to live by as an investor and trader in the cryptocurrency markets. So like I said before, I'm not going to be focusing on the upward price reversals, because I focused on that in a bit more detail in my article about the Fear and Greed Index and how it can predict reversals to the upside for Bitcoin. But today I'm going to be focusing on these pullbacks. So these are 2 or at least 3 sets of pullbacks. So that's one pullback, and this is one pullback as well, all the way to here, and then this is the third pullback. So 1, 2, 3. But because this is a very close sort of situation, I've highlighted this as one event, but I'm going to discuss it in a bit more detail as we go along. So right over here, this is where Bitcoin had its 45% rally in 2 days. This is when the Chinese president publicly endorsed blockchain, and then we couldn't really hold. We couldn't sustain that momentum. We couldn't have that price strength confirmation above the range high. This is the range high. The range high of this monthly range, something I've been talking about over the past few weeks. So we couldn't hold this range high as a new support, so we broke down all the way down there. So if we cycle back to the Fear and Greed Index, this was that moment. This was that moment where we peaked out of the range for the Fear and Greed Index, and we just broke down right back into the range. So of course, these ranges, this range over here, the monthly range for Bitcoin's price and the range for the Fear and Greed Index, they're just coincidental. I wouldn't focus and lose myself in that necessarily, but I'd focus on these pullbacks and every time the Fear and Greed Index has that sort of wicking past its range. So that's the first instance. This is going to be the next instance where we see around this time, we see the Fear and Greed Index also poke out over here. And of course, this was around this time, I guess, so the Fear and Greed Index won't really predict and capture those wicks. You're not going to sell the exact top with the Fear and Greed Index, but it's going to help you catch the majority of the move. And that's what it's all about for a investor and trader. Don't try and catch 0 to 100. Try and maybe catch, you see that confirmation, so price has gone 10% to the upside, but you want to capture most of the move. So instead of capturing 100% of the move, you capture 80% of the move, and that's fantastic. And essentially that translates into your profitability as a trader and an investor. You don't have to capture this wick right over here and then capture the absolute top over here, because that's impossible. It's really tough to do, and that's not the point. The point is for you to be profitable. And if you can be profitable, whether that's buying for a 2% swing or a 20% swing, you're winning as a trader, as an investor, because it's all about being profitable. And if you can be profitable 1%, 2%, 3%, 100%, then you're winning at this game. So the index won't help you catch the peak, but it will help you catch the majority of the move. So, and that's this instance right over here. But afterwards, we saw a dip into the range, and that's something to bear in mind, because this was an important thing for Bitcoin's price action, because whenever we cycle back, this was on the 24th of January, so this was when we saw a retest of the 200 EMA. So in this case, the Fear and Greed Index is blind to these very important things in Bitcoin's price, because the 200 EMA had to hold as a support, because if it did, then we'd know that long-term investors are bullish on Bitcoin, because the 200 daily exponential moving average is a long-term gauge of investor sentiment. So retesting this as a support was vital for Bitcoin, and as you can see, it's done very well since then. The 200 EMA had to hold as a support for Bitcoin to be bullish, and that's exactly what happened. So the fear and greed index just showed to us that it returned to the range for a brief moment and then escaped it once again. In fact, people were greedy at higher levels because there's something about that 200 exponential moving average that really speaks to people on a primordial and psychological subconscious way. And here's the last peak. This is where we peaked again, right over here. So if we cycle here, of course we won't catch the top. Once again, remember guys, we're not going to capture the top, but with appropriate TA, and this is the monthly order block that I was talking about a few days ago. This was the monthly order block. This is the price action resistance that I was paying attention to. So coupled with the fear and greed index, we know we're in a greedy territory, something to bear in mind and be wary about. And if we have this order block coming up, if we have this monthly resistance area coming up, if we're getting this fear and greed index signal right over here, and this order block is over here, that's two forms of confirmation that you have to bear in mind, that there's a lot of greed in the market, there's a resistance coming. Let's make that quick calculation that, well, there might be a pullback coming. So that's a very good sort of tool to use in your Confluence along with price action analysis. And of course, since then, we've seen a pullback on Bitcoin's price, and we're still seeing that pullback. Now, going forward, where could Bitcoin dip to? Well, I've spoken about those levels in yesterday's video, so check that video out if you'd like. But the thing I'd like to mention before we close is that I'd think about the fear and greed index reaching this range once again. I'd like it to dip into the range and then see where Bitcoin's price is at that point, because if Bitcoin reaches one of my levels that I spoke about yesterday and the fear and greed index happens to be around this level or is even wicking into the range, that's going to be a very interesting development that has confluence between the index and Bitcoin's price. So it's not just about a certain price level for Bitcoin and that we're waiting for that price level. There's a lot to that as well, but we also have to have confluence among other indicators and indices such as this one. And if we have that confluence, it builds for a better picture of understanding and will help you really gain an edge in the market. And that's just about it for today's episode on Direct Capital channel. I hope you've enjoyed it. Leave a like if you've liked this episode, of course. Subscribe as always if you want to see more videos like this in the future. I'm more than happy to produce this content on a daily basis, so as long that you find value in it. And of course, join the live stream today. The altcoin TA live stream is today at 7 p.m. UTC. The link to that live stream is in the description down below. We're going to have a great time. We're going to be charting altcoins and talking about the market. So don't miss it. Feel free to join and suggest any altcoin picks that you'd like me to chart for you, and I'd be more than happy to do that. And that's just about it for today's video. I'm Rect Capital, and I'll speak to you soon.